let's first talk about frame. Frame is one of those topics that's really popular to discuss in the manosphere. Everyone's like, you gotta hold frame, bro. You know, it's just, it's a meme almost. But what is frame exactly? Well, frame is a set of assumptions that are agreed upon by people. Okay, it's a mouthful. We're gonna go into it. And is this big enough, guys, in the back? Because I've been told that sometimes it's hard to see. You guys see that okay? Somebody? Yeah, thank you. So it's a set of agreed upon assumptions. So when you and a woman are on a date and she doesn't know yet whether or not she's attracted to you, there's going to be maybe this challenge of your frame, and we're going to get into shit test in a moment because that's how women will tend to challenge your frame. But you have these two different perceptions of reality. So when you're trying to make a woman attracted to you, when you want her to be attracted to you, the key point to making that happen is to have her come into your frame. And so long as that hasn't occurred, the woman is not sort of fully invested in you. And frame is used all over, well beyond even just the dating space. The media, for instance, its primary purpose is to frame. So what the media will do is it will control the conversation, because if you control the conversation, you control the bounds in which people can think. And if you control the bounds in which people can think, you control people. And so one of the reasons that governments have focused much more on what we will call psychological operations over the years is because it's much easier to control a population if you can get them to simply agree with you rather than having to use physical force. If you can convince somebody who's maybe got a lot more power, like the population at large has a lot more implicit power based on numbers, if you can convince them through control of the frame to maybe feel disempowered, then you're able to control the conversation. So you can see how frame is really everything. This is why they say that proverbially the pen is mightier than the sword. So when this comes to men in their interactions with women, it's obviously important because the same thing applies. And one of the main ways that you're going to see the manosphere will talk about how to control the frame is going to be very tactical, it's very technical. And it has to deal mostly with shit tests. Shit tests are really frame tests. And while this isn't going to be like an encyclopedic exploration of shit tests, because there's a lot of different ones and there's a lot of different responses to shit tests you can do. Just for basic housekeeping, there's shit tests that are more about whether or not you're an attractive guy, so we'll call that desire. And then there's shit tests that are about whether or not you care about her, which are more comfort. We're not going to go into the details of that, but suffice to say, you have shit tests, and we're going to explore 3 primary ways that maybe you'll respond to a shit test. So let's give like a very simple example here. You cold approach a girl in a mall, and she says to you, how many other women do you approach like this? So the first way that maybe you'll respond to this, well, first we'll give the example of a guy who would respond poorly. So the sort of standard guy who's not initiated into this stuff will answer her directly. And what he'll say is something like, oh no, I don't usually do this, I just really thought you were cute and I wanted to talk to you. And that would be considered on a tactical level at least failing the shit test, because what the guy's done is he's acknowledged her framing of him as doing something that maybe he shouldn't be doing. And so when that's occurred, now that may not be the end of the interaction for the guy, because the guy may say that with a very genuine authenticity. It might not blow him out of the water, but the woman's going to be then like sniffing around, and the guy can expect more shit tests. And certainly if he keeps failing this, she's eventually going to lose interest because he's accepted her frame of the interaction, and therefore he's no longer leading. He was qualifying himself to her. So one of the most classic ways that you would respond to this instead is with and assumption. So amplification. So amplification. And there's two ways you can amplify. You can either agree and amplify, or you can disagree and amplify. And so an example of that would be, so she says, how many other women have you approached like this? And you can say, oh, you're number 50 today. And so it's like you make it kind of like an absurd number, and you're not showing any shame around it, and so that throws her off, right? You're basically saying that her challenge to your frame is silly, so I'm going to respond in a silly way. You could also do disagree and amplify, and you could say, actually, you're the first woman who I've talked to besides for my mother. And that'll also throw her off because it's another absurd statement. That can work really well. Another way that you can do it is you can deflect. And deflect is basically you are going to ignore what she's saying to you. So she asks you, how many other women have you approached like this today? And you say, you know, the thing about you, the reason I wanted to go and talk to you is like, I noticed that you were carrying these 2 big bags of shoes, and I was wondering, are you a shoe hoarder? Like, are you one of those girls that's got like closets full of shoes in there? Like, whatever. You know, the point is that you just ignore her statement, and you continue, you make more assumptions about her, you continue with your approach gambit. And very often this works. And the reason it works is because what you're basically saying is that her frame challenge is not relevant, it's not worth even responding to, it's not worth legitimizing. And this will work well with most women and with most shit tests because they jump onto the next shiny object, right? They don't necessarily come back to that, they're not fixated on it. But some women are. And so if a woman is going to really push on this shit test and she's like, no, really, how many other women do you approach? Then you might move to number 3, which is reversal. And reversal is probably the most powerful of the 3, although most guys don't necessarily use it immediately. So if she says, how many other women do you approach like this? You would respond and say, are you one of those women who's always comparing herself to other girls? And so what you do is you make her go a little bit on the defensive, that she's associating herself, that she has to be like, no, I'm not thinking about other women, so she's now qualifying herself to you. And in certain situations, that can actually be really, really powerful, especially if she's been testing you a good amount. And so the key thing here is that you don't want to be qualifying yourself to her. And so this is one of the things that guys, when they first start off in game, is they make a lot of mistakes about, because they're out trying to impress girls and be attractive. And while it's very important to understand what is and isn't attractive, at the end of the day, if you're just focused on being attractive to a woman, then you are completely in her frame. You're like a dancing monkey, you're a clown, because you're constantly trying to show her, hey, look at me, I'm attractive, look at me, I'm attractive. And after 15 minutes or so, 30 minutes certainly, she's not going to be interested anymore. When you start to qualify her and look at her and say, try to figure her out, is she good enough for you? That attitude, that mindset is much more effective. So a lot of conversations around frame in the Manosphere revolve around this area, which is a very tactical area. But there's a catch here, and the reality is that